G'day YouTubers and welcome to episode 3 of the Offshore series east of Stradbroke. We left off the last episode at Halfway Reef, so I'm going to continue on with this episode to the next nearest spot, which are Boat Rock and the Group. These are exposed rocky islands or islets, whichever you prefer. They're always above water, or parts of them are always above water, so they're very easy to find. You can't miss them. I've had 2 visits to this area in the last 3 or 4 years. That's not a lot of time to search around, so anything I've got to say about the area is fairly old information. It used to be a great fishing spot. That may have changed over the years, but I'm sure the structure's still there and the fish should be there. So if you go out to any of these marks, have a hunt around and see what you can find on your sounder, you should be able to turn up something. I've measured this route from the northern end of the Halfway Reef over to Boat Rock. It's less than a nautical mile, couple of minutes travel at 20 knots. Really close, as everything is in this area. If you're coming from the southern end of the Halfway Reef, you are almost in the Boat Rock area anyway. Before we look at some of the marks in the area of Boat Rock, I'm just going to go and give you an overview of all the different spots, or actually not even all the different spots in the area. Just some of the main fishing spots in this area. There's lots of others in between. You've just got to search them out a little bit. As I've said previously, I think in the last video, it seemed to me back in the day that you just point your boat in any direction, keep your eye on the sounder, and in this area, sooner or later, you're going to find some fish. Might not have been quite that good, but it just seemed as though you couldn't miss. But that's going back a few years now. You might want to pause the video just here and there to have a look at the various colour backgrounds I've put on, and each colour has its own sort of characteristics for highlighting the structure that's available on the bottom. If you can get your head around that, it gives you a really good idea just where the best spots to spend your time looking are going to be. Now this first spot here is another one that I've lined up from marks that I remember when we didn't have a GPS to put us on the spot, and then I've looked on the Navionics map, lined these marks up, and there's some structure showing on the Navionics map very close to where I thought it should be, so I've decided that the mark should go on that structure and I'll put it there. So it's not an actual GPS mark, it's one that I've done up from memory and looking at the Navionics map, but there is structure there and it used to fish well. Same story with this mark. It's one that I've looked at on the Navionics map, lined up the landmarks that I remember, looked at what Navionics said about the bottom, moved it slightly to match the bottom contours that are shown on Navionics, and put the mark in for you. It'll be really close to where we used to fish, but again, not a GPS mark, so have a hunt around there with your sounder. And this is the third mark with the same story behind it. I've lined up some landmarks, looked on Navionics at the bottom contours and placed the mark according to all of that. So again, have a sound around there. It should be a decent spot, it used to be. These next 4 marks have been picked up somewhere on the internet. The one in green is just a generic mark for Boat Rock. It's not a fishing mark or anything, just something to put in your GPS so you can locate Boat Rock easily. The others came from forums or something, and I may have fished them at some time, but I don't have any marks for them. They're in the general Boat Rock area, and anywhere in that area is worth a sound around. And this last one of the group of 4 has a notation on it to fish the outgoing tide. I don't know how correct that is, but wherever I picked the mark up from had that notation on it, so I've just copied it in. And this mark here had a notation of snapper and kingies against it. Don't remember where I got this one either, but looking at the Navionics map and the bottom contours, I would have actually put this mark probably a little bit further northeast than whoever gave it out is actually putting it. Not far, just a shade further northeast. So if you're out there looking at this mark and you're not seeing anything near it, just try a little bit further northeast and see how you go there. The bottom contours shown on Navionics look a lot more promising just that little bit further northeast. And this final mark is supposed to be a wreck. I don't have any other information on it, so I don't know what sort of wreck it is. Maybe just someone's fishing boat, it may be a trawler, I don't know, you'd have to sound around and see if it's still there, see if you can find it. I just put it here because wrecks attract fish, so if it is still there, it's well worth having a look at. So that covers the actual spots I have around Boat Rock, but there's a lot more to Boat Rock than that, so I'm going to talk about that for a little bit right now. Start off looking at the bottom contours around Boat Rock. As you can see, immediately around the rock, those really close together contour lines indicate a very sharp drop-off. So it drops down pretty deep very quickly. In fact, it drops off from 10 metres to about 35 metres. That's a distance of 25 metres in 25 metres. So that's about a 45 degree drop-off, which is very steep. And of course, when you get a steep drop-off like that, there's a lot of opportunity for fish to be holding around it. This next screenshot with the blue shading I don't find all that helpful in this particular case. To my eye, it's just not showing the contour differences. Oh, and I'll just mention that the only reason I'm flashing that white line on the screen is to give you a rough idea of the boundary, no other reason than that. However, the shading on this particular map is great. I can see the bottom contours really well here, and it gives me a really good idea just whereabouts in relation to the exposed rock I should be sounding around to find some fish. And as I mentioned previously, although there's a lot of fishing spots in this area, you don't want to spend all day sounding around, so you need to have some sort of idea just where you want to spend your time sounding, so that when you get out there, that's what you do, find the fish and get some fishing in. Now, I don't mind being on the water, and sometimes I'm happy to just sound around all day and fairly wet a line, but other times I want to throw a line in and just relax and wait for the fish to bite. So it just depends on your temperament, I guess, just how much time you want to spend sounding. Most people don't want to spend very much time sounding around, although it is an essential skill to have if you want to come home with fish regularly. I've got some screenshots from Bathy Maps of this same area. Now, Bathy Maps isn't as high resolution imagery as the Navionics maps, so I've had to include a lot larger area here in order to get a reasonable focus, for want of a better word. If I zoom in too far, the image gets very pixelated and it's really hard to interpret, but when you zoom out to about here, you can see the contours on the bottom pretty plainly. Bathy Maps gives us a number of different colour options for viewing the contours on the bottom, and I find some better than others, but putting them all together gives me a really good idea of what the bottom looks like. The first one of the lot is probably the least pixelated of them. The colours blend in better, and as we look through the others, you'll see the pixelation in them, because I guess really I'm zoomed in maybe a little bit too far, but I wanted to get the detail of this area specifically. The other thing I'll mention is I've got a circle flashing up there every now and then. That's just circling the points that I've already spoken about. There's some other points on the map that we're going to get to a little bit later in the video. There's some aerial shots here from Google Earth. You can't see a lot of the reef in these shots. One or two of them you might see a little bit of the reef, but in general they don't show much of the reef, not like some of the others where the reefs are a bit shallower or the water's clearer and you can see them. But what they do show is how rough it can get around here, and also that there's two areas that break. The exposed rock and another piece a little bit to the northwest that's not always exposed. So as always, if you're working in and around rocks, be extremely careful, watch your sounder, go slow, and don't get too close. You don't need to get right on top of the rock to find good fish. What you're looking for is to drop off a bit away from the rock. There's plenty of them. And when I put the marks up earlier in the video, I thought I was a bit short of marks, but I went ahead with them anyway, thinking, oh, maybe I've lost them. And I've now come across them. I had them in a different category, so I'll put them up now rather than go back and redo that part of the video that's already finished. It takes me a couple of weeks to get these videos together, and I really don't want to redo part of it, so I'll just add these next lot of marks in around Boat Rock in a separate section of the video. Sorry about that, but if you're looking at all the video, you won't miss them anyway. And if you're looking at the names I've given these marks, You might realise that I've picked them up off internet forums. Don't know which ones or when, but whenever I see a mark on an internet forum, I generally add it to my list with the intention that one day if I'm in the area, I might check them out. So these marks I may have fished and just not had a mark for it, because back in the day we didn't have those sort of things, but they're starting points for you to have a search around on your sounders anyway. And I've made these new marks in red and left the old marks up there so you can see the relationship between all the marks. And once you have the relationships clear, you can work out a plan of attack to sound around all of them in the shortest possible time. And just to finish off the marks in the Boat Rock area, this is an overlay on top of the Navionics chart that shows the bottom. I've just used the colour that shows the bottom the best for me. I hope it works for you. It should give you an idea of just where the marks are in relation to the bottom contours. Again, it's all about trying to figure out which marks are the ones that you want to sound first, so that you don't spend all day sounding around and you do have some time left for fishing. I've only just taken up trolling in the last couple of years, so I don't have any personal experience around the Boat Rock area, but I have had an awful lot of people tell me that trolling around the Boat Rock area is very productive at the right time of year. You get all sorts of pelagics there. Mostly people tell me about Spanish mackerel, but I have heard of lots of other things being caught there as well. So if you're into trolling, have a troll around the Boat Rock area, not just on the marks, but around the whole area, and see how you go. If the reports I've heard are accurate, you should come home with something. But again, that may depend on the time of year, so make sure your fish you're after is in season. When I showed the marks on the Baphomet overlay, I did that part of the video a few days ago. I did say that I was going to show you the marks that were around the group later on in this video, but the video is about 12 minutes long now, and if I start to cover the group, I'm going to cover at least another 10 or 12 minutes. I think that's getting too long for the video, so I'm going to cut this video off now and I'll cover the group in the next video. Because these videos go together over a couple of weeks period, it's a little bit hard to know what's going to happen when I begin the video by the time I get to the end of it. So apologies for misleading you, I will get to it in the next video. Until then, good fishing.